Hi, this is Sarah. I have been promising to create a video with recommended readings for sociology students with lockdown and the summer holiday in mind. These books are recommended reading to extend your sociological knowledge and to help you kind of put some of your theory into context and to keep you current in terms of key sociological debates that are happening around us right now. This will be perfect for year 12s or year 13s who are going to university in September. These books will give you something to engage your new university peers with, your new lecturers. People are going to say to you, what did you do with all of that time during lockdown? What did you do over the summer? What have you read recently? So this may be for year 12, something that you want to include in your UCAS personal statement, where you will maybe discuss what you really took from reading one of these books and how that then linked in with your studies or linked in with your desire to study sociology at university. You can order these books on websites where you can get some really good deals, Amazon sometimes, Abe Books, ABE. There's lots of different ways that you can pick up secondhand copies of these books, but you can also get audio books, which means if you want to be able to listen to them, maybe while you're traveling or while you're relaxing, then that might be something that some people prefer to actually reading the book. And you may also, if you have kind of a group of friends who want to read the same book together, you could take turns in recording audio chapters and sending them to each other. So there's lots of creative ways that you could make reading one of these books over your summer even more engaging and more doable if you feel like reading a high-level text is quite challenging for you. There's lots of ways you can approach that in a way that kind of scaffolds it to make it more approachable for you. I'm personally, the first book on the list, I'm reading it with a group of sociology teachers, and then in a couple of weeks' time we're having an online kind of book group meeting where we're going to get together and talk about the key themes and how that book changed our development and our thinking. So that might be something else that you want to do online, or even a socially distanced meet-up in a park, you know, to talk about one of these books. So first book on the list, and this is a book that I'm sure you would have heard people talking about at the moment, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. So this is by Rennie Edo-Lodge. And this is absolutely a current book at the moment. It's been around for a while, but with the Black Lives Matter movement being so prominent at the moment, this has really been talked about a lot through kind of social media and other channels at the moment. So this is a fantastic link in to lots of your topic areas because race and ethnicity come up a lot. This will really help if you're thinking about institutional racism, racism in education, and really thinking about kind of in sociology, it's those very small things sometimes, isn't it, that have a big impact. And some of the issues in here will probably make you more aware, and really, regardless of your own ethnicity, there will be wow moments in this book for you. So I haven't read it all yet, but I would definitely recommend this as a kind of very current text to read over the summer. Secondly, I read this book recently, and this is told through the perspective of a sociology A-level student. And that to me just makes it really, really fantastic. So it's this student kind of navigating, her name's Myla, and she's navigating her way through becoming a sociologist. And through that, she meets all of the key sociologists. So it's called Dead White Men and Other Important People. And it's by Angus Bancroft and Ralph Fevre, okay? And this, it's just brilliant because especially even if you were a GCSE student now and you were coming into sociology, this would be a fantastic read. It's very readable. It's written as if it's fiction, but it does introduce all of the key sociological thinkers. So the kind of chapters, each chapter kind of has a sociological lesson for you, really. So let's give you an example. There's a chapter called In Two Acts, and this chapter is all about, can sociology make you a better person? And it talks about respect and codes of honour, and then that brings in Pierre Bourdieu and his ideas of disposition and habitus. Talks about social capital, being the rules of the game, and habitus and language as an instrument of power. So this really gets some of those key debates, and it really breaks them down and puts them into a really digestible and real, it's this sixth form student kind of grappling and trying to work out what is meant by being a sociologist. So I'd really recommend that. I'm going to put links to all of these books in the bit below this video, so you'll be able to go back, and what I'll do is I'll link my website, and then you'll be able to see the links to the books on my website. So if you are a year 12 or year 13 sociology student, there is no way that you have escaped coming across Deborah Udell and David Gilbourne's work. So you probably cite them in education when you're talking about race and ethnicity, when you're talking about institutional racism, or when you are discussing in your essays disparities in achievement with regards to ethnic groups. But you may also refer to them when you're looking at the A to C curriculum. So they do fit in as well with marketisation. So you will have heard of them, no doubt. This book is called Rationing Education. So it's by Deborah Udell and David Gilbourne. And the reason I think this is a fantastic book for a sociology student to read is it has that live research that was done. So these are kind of ethnographic studies, lots of interviews. And in here, there are big chunks of interview dialogue. So there are school pupils in, I think it was a London comprehensive school where this study was done, school pupils speaking openly to the interviewers about institutional racism, about what being a black pupil feels like and how they perceive the racism. And they even say in this, you wouldn't think this was a racist school if you popped in for one day, but when you experience it over time, you start to notice these kind of key patterns and these kind of hidden institutional racist kind of policies or results of policies. And so having a read of this is, even if you kind of dip in and dip out of this, because it's quite a heavy text, but really going through and reading some of the interview dialogue is really, really worthwhile, because you can think of it from an education point of view, but you can also think of it from your research methods point of view and the methods that they've used. And that then gives you examples to use in your essays. And it shows you that this research really is happening. It's not just something that we see in textbooks in the classroom. So here's another possibility, and this is a really satisfying read. This is not as challenging as some of the other texts, which are quite high level academic, but this is a really, really nice read. It's called Natives, okay, and this is by Akala, and he's a hip hop artist apparently. I'm far too old to know about these things, but he's also an educator and a social entrepreneur, and he writes about his life, but he also explores kind of the kind of social, political things that happen. He kind of puts a history, like a timeline through the 70s, 80s, or he starts in the 60s, really kind of goes through all these different events, things that have happened in London, but also he creates parallels with other cities in the UK. And what he does is he really kind of tears apart and interrogates this idea of the British Empire and some of the attitudes that we hold because of that. So this is a really valuable read, especially at the moment, if you're really engaging with the kind of extra learning we can do in relation to the Black Lives Matter movement. Okay, now, this is a huge book. This is one of the most classic texts in sociology, and this is Simone de Beauvoir's book, The Second Sex. This would be a very ambitious read. So if you are an incredibly A-star aspiring, incredibly engaged sociology student who is definitely planning to study sociology at university, have a go at this. Really challenge yourself. You will need to do this in small chunks. It is a pretty intense book, but it also is a real insight into some of the key thinkers who have really influenced our sociological thinking, and of course from a feminist perspective. So if you really want to get stuck into a classic feminist sociological piece of literature. Simone de Beauvoir is for you. Okay. But to balance that out, if you would like something that would get you thinking about class, race, gender, this, Ruby Fruit Jungle, is a fiction book that was written in, I think it was the 1970s, or was at least, I think, set in the 70s. I've read this several times. It's a fantastic book. It is about a young teenage girl. She talks about her race experiences as a black pupil, but she also is discovering her sexuality. And there's a whole load of sociological threads kind of running through this book as you follow her story. And at its time when this was released was an absolutely groundbreaking text. So this isn't a kind of academic sociological text, but this is something that anyone, if you speak to anyone who is a sociologist, they generally would have read and be able to comment on this book. So this is, you know, a really, really interesting one. If you're happy with a bit of quite explicit exploration of someone's sexual journey, if you're okay with that, then this is absolutely the book for you. Maybe check with your parents if you're not too sure whether they'll be happy with that. But, you know, have a look into it. It's really got some very good sociology to analyse. And here, another person, Diane Ray, that I'm sure you've come across when you're studying education because of all of her work on class and working class pupils. You might have come across her paper, Strangers in Paradise, where she researched working class pupils' experiences of going to elite universities and how they felt literally like strangers in paradise. So this book, Miseducation. Now, Diane Ray is a high-level academic. I think she's based at the University of Kent. I'm not 100% sure at the moment. But she writes in a way that is so accessible. So you really can have a really enjoyable read of this, but it also is a really impressive text to have read. And it will really feed in to particularly your education part of your paper 1, but all of your sociological understanding on class. This will provide you with some real evaluative insight. So that's Miseducation by Diane Ray. I really, really enjoyed reading that one. Okay, Danny Dorling. So I had the pleasure of seeing Danny Dorling lecture last year, and he is a social geographer. He's based at Oxford University, and he's incredibly passionate about engaging all types of students to study sociology and geography. And he really wants that to be a kind of inclusive setting. And he's written lots and lots of books, but this one is called Inequality and the 1%. So it comes from a geography background, but this gives you a very kind of, you know, in some ways economics-based, economy-based understanding. There's quite a lot of diagrams and things in here. So if you're sort of thinking, oh, I really want to get stuck into this, you know, it talks about the marketing of nutrition. It talks about the disparities of wealth. So if you're really interested in that kind of 1%, that where all of that wealth is held, and the economic disparities that we have worldwide, then this is the book for you. So Danny Dorling, and he's absolutely fantastic. I really, really admire him. So we've got 2 books left, and this one is called Liberating Motherhood. So if your favourite topic area so far of sociology has been the family, this is the book for you. Vanessa Lawrenshaw, who is an absolutely fantastic writer, absolutely fantastic person as well. I was lucky enough to go to school with her, and still in touch with her now. She wrote this within the last few years, and she's absolutely, this is a real call to action kind of feminist piece. So she talks about there needing to be a movement for mothers, and this fits in really well when you're thinking about a division of domestic labour, the idea of this reserve army of labour, the idea of the triple shift, the dual burden, the mental load, all of these things, all of this kind of unpaid domestic labour. And she calls for a new movement called the Purple Stockings movement. And this is just a fantastic, there's so much reference to other academic texts. There's so much reference to, and quotes from different people, different sociologists, covers all sorts of, you know, everything, pregnancy, breastfeeding, love, relationships, but, you know, economic things like GDP and that kind of thing as well. So there really is a lot you can get stuck into here, and this would really enrich your understanding of women's position in the family. So I'd really recommend that. It's a lovely book to read. And finally, this was a gift, and I was given this by a fellow sociology and economics teacher, and a friend of mine, he gave me this for my birthday, and this is absolutely fantastic, and I had never heard of it before. So it's called Moxie, and it's by Jennifer Matthew. Okay, and this is a fiction. It's a very light read. If you are looking for something that is really not too challenging, but you want to read something that makes you think about sociology, this has got lots of images, lots of pictures, lots of kind of diary entries, and this is written in the voice of a teenage girl who becomes part of a feminist movement within her school, and she suddenly starts to notice the kind of sexism in the classroom, even from the teachers, and the kind of sexism that's allowed in the classroom from the boys that she's at school with. And it really, I mean, there's a bit of foul language in here, so check with your parents if you think they may or may not be happy with you reading that. But it's a very, very frank discussion of feminism and of activism, and that is a really enjoyable summer read. So you could pair this with kind of a more academic, more hard, heavy going text, and that would be the kind of perfect summer. You could dip between the two of those. So if you have any questions, drop me a line beneath. I will link to my website, which will have links through to all of these books, and it will remind you of the cover, the title, and the author. And please, sociology students, do think about taking on a significant read over this summer, not just to build your ability to be evaluative and be critical and to have a broader range of understanding for sociology, but also because being able to engage in discussions about what you've read recently, whether that's through university interviews, whether that's, Oxford, Cambridge, if you're going to interviews and you want to study social sciences, you're going to be expected to really be able to show a curiosity for learning. And so even if you read a text and you say, well, I didn't really get all of it, but this bit really struck me and I want to find out more about that, that's what those universities are looking for at interview. And it's what they're looking for to see coming through from your statement. So please engage with some sociology this summer, and I promise you won't regret it. Enjoy.